If you've ever thought your marriage was rock solid, if you've ever believed you truly knew the person you sleep beside every night, then I want you to listen closely, because my husband fooled me for 6 years. And the day I finally learned the truth, I realized I'd been living with a stranger who was capable of things I still struggle to understand. I'm talking about lies, affairs, offshore accounts, a burner phone filled with women he never thought I'd see. And yes, a pregnant mistress whose existence he kept hidden while kissing me goodbye every morning. My name is Naomi, and this is the story of how I went from loyal wife to the woman who took down a man who thought he was untouchable. It's messy. It's painful. It's shocking. But it's also a story about rediscovering myself, the real me, the one he tried to erase. Before we dive in, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to The Spoken Pen so you never miss stories like this one. And comment below where in the world you're listening from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. Alright, let's start at the moment everything changed, even though I didn't know it yet. I always believed I was a good wife. The kind who remembered anniversaries, packed lunches when Brett was too stressed to eat, and lit candles on the nights I thought we needed a little spark. 6 years of marriage should have meant something. And maybe it did, just not what I imagined. Because the truth is, I was in love with the idea of us. I was in love with the version of Brett I thought existed. The version he let me see. That Friday afternoon, I left the city with the trunk full of everything I thought would make him smile. Garlic butter lobster tails. His favorite truffle mashed potatoes. And the silky red nightgown he bought me last Christmas, the one I'd never even worn because he always came home exhausted and fell asleep before anything romantic could happen. I remember humming along with the radio as I turned onto that gravel road, sunlight slipping through tall pines like nature was welcoming me to a place I'd only visited twice in our entire marriage, the lake house Brett claimed he used for fishing weekends. Fishing. Right. Back then, I didn't know the house had become something else entirely. That it wasn't just his retreat, but his hideaway. His secret world. His stage for the life he lived without me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I pulled up and instantly noticed something wrong. Brett's black Range Rover was parked in its usual spot, but sitting beside it was a white Mercedes convertible I'd never seen before. And no, not the rental company kind. No stickers. No dealership plates. It was someone's car, someone comfortable enough to park right next to my husband's. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. Maybe it belonged to one of his colleagues. Maybe he'd invited a friend. Brett didn't have many friends, but still, anything was better than the alternative. I grabbed the containers of food and headed toward the front door. The house looked exactly the way I remembered, cedarwood glowing warm gold in the late afternoon, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. It was quiet. Too quiet. Usually Brett had music playing, something annoyingly upbeat or those pretentious ambient playlists he said helped him think. I knocked. Lightly at first. Then harder. Nothing. And then I heard it. A woman's laugh. Bright. Effortless. Beautiful. It floated from the back deck, the one that wrapped around toward the lake. My heart dropped into my stomach. That was no colleague's laugh. But like a fool, I still held on to hope. I don't know why, maybe because once you love someone deeply enough, your mind becomes an expert at lying to you in ways your eyes can't. I followed the stone path around the house and then I saw them. My husband, Brett, expensive haircut, sun hitting the gold flecks in his brown hair, sitting comfortably in an oversized deck chair. And on his lap, wearing a soft blue sundress that matched the water behind her, was a blonde woman I'd never seen before. Long hair. Perfect smile. Younger than me. And her arms draped around his neck like she'd done it 1,000 times. They were talking softly. His hand played with a strand of her hair. Her head rested on his shoulder. They looked natural together. Too natural. The food almost slipped from my hands, but somehow I caught everything before it hit the ground. "Brett," she whispered, giggling. "You have to tell her. I hate sneaking around like this." "Tell who?" He exhaled. "I know, Candace. I know. I just..." Naomi would take everything in the divorce. Her lawyer would destroy me. I need more time. Naomi. My name. He said my name so casually it made my skin crawl. Candace sighed dramatically and pressed her forehead against his. "We've been doing this for over a year. I'm not getting younger. Over a year." My ears rang. My hands shook. Suddenly every fishing trip, every late-night meeting, every weekend he needed space to unwind, snapped into place like clicking pieces of a puzzle I never knew existed. I didn't storm out there. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them like the version of me in movies always imagined doing. Instead, I did something smarter. I took out my phone. Hands trembling. Breath held. Click. Brett kissing her neck. Click. Candace tracing circles on his chest. Click. His hands sliding up her back. Click. The lake house clear behind them. Then I recorded a video, 3 minutes of them discussing their future together like I was already gone. Brett talked about property in the Bahamas. She talked about not wanting to hide forever. They talked about me like I was an annoying obstacle, not a human being. When I had enough evidence to destroy him legally, emotionally, and socially, I backed away quietly, walked to my car, and drove home in silence. 3 hours later, I pulled into my driveway and stared at the house I thought we'd built together. The modern brownstone. The manicured lawn. The expensive metal sculpture Brett insisted on buying because it was artistic. Suddenly all I could see was a stage, one he performed on every day, pretending to be a husband while living another life behind my back. Inside the house, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I became someone else completely. Someone sharp. Someone cold. Someone calculating. Because love makes you soft, but betrayal? Betrayal turns you into steel. I went straight to his office. Brett always thought I never touched his files because I once told him I trusted him. That was the biggest joke of my life. I opened the drawers and began taking photos of everything. Bank statements. Property documents. Business files. Then I pulled out our credit card statements and my breath caught. There it was. A pattern so obvious I wanted to punch myself for missing it. Hotels and cities he'd never mentioned. Jewelry purchases I never received. Restaurant bills for 2. Flowers, always the same florist, on random afternoons. I transferred everything to a secure cloud folder and opened my laptop. Divorce attorneys. Not just any, the top specialists for high net worth clients. The ones who ripped cheaters apart like wild animals. By 2 a.m., I had a plan. I had evidence. I had clarity. Our marriage wasn't dying. It was dead. Saturday morning I woke surrounded by notes, files, and a cold cup of coffee. I called my best friend, Simone, the one person who always sensed when something was off. She arrived 40 minutes later with bagels and iced lattes. When I showed her the photos and video, her mouth hung open. "Girl," she whispered, "we're about to ruin this man." Her support gave me strength I didn't know I still had. We spent hours going through transactions. Simone, who had minored in accounting before becoming a designer, found transfers I completely missed. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. Money moving like water through a maze so complicated it made me dizzy. "This isn't just cheating," she said, jaw-dropping. "This is asset hiding. He's been preparing to leave you." The words hit like a sledgehammer. Preparing to leave me. While I cooked. Cleaned. Waited. Trusted. That afternoon, I emailed the most ruthless divorce lawyer in the city, Leonard Hayes. And by Monday morning, I was sitting across from him in a glass-walled conference room, sliding a thick folder of evidence across the table. He spent 20 minutes reading. Then he looked at me and said, "Mrs. Grant, we're going to destroy him." For the first time in 2 days, I felt something powerful settle inside me. Not peace. Not closure. Purpose. Because if Brett wanted war, he had just chosen the wrong woman. Everything that happened after that meeting with Leonard felt like stepping onto a moving train, fast, loud, and electrifying in a way I hadn't felt in years. Betrayal wakes you up. It snaps nerves you didn't know you had. And when you realize someone you loved has been lying to you for so long, something inside you changes. Permanently. Leonard started by handing me a list. Not a small one. Pages. Names of forensic accountants, investigators, private corporate analysts. And then he looked at me the way a doctor looks at someone who has just been diagnosed with something serious. "Most wives only find out half the truth," he said gently, though his eyes stayed sharp. "If you want justice, real justice, you need a team." I nodded, because I already knew Brett was hiding things. But I didn't know how deep the rot went. Not yet. That afternoon, I met with the forensic accountant Leonard trusted the most, a woman named Elaine McKenna. Gray streaks over jet black hair, tortoiseshell glasses, and an expression so calm and precise it felt like she could see through me and the walls behind me. When she shook my hand, she didn't say, "Nice to meet you." She said, "I'm sorry you're here." And I instantly understood why Leonard called her the best. She wasn't cold, she was focused, the kind of person who didn't waste empathy on the surface when she could channel it into the work. I handed her copies of every bank statement and transaction Simone and I had collected. Elaine clicked through the folders with terrifying speed. Every few seconds she hummed, squinted, or scribbled a number onto a yellow legal pad. After about 10 minutes she pushed the laptop slightly toward me. "Do you see this?" she asked. At first, I didn't. Not until she traced her finger across 2 columns. Money moving out. Money moving in. But the pattern was wrong, too perfect, too clean, too predictable. Like a cycle. "That's how people hide assets," she said. "They move money the same way a magician moves cards, fast enough that most people never see the trick." I swallowed. "How much, do you think he's hiding? She took a slow breath. Conservatively? A few million. Realistically, a lot more. Millions. The air felt heavy. Brett had been siphoning away our money. Money from his business. Money from mine. Money he must have believed I'd never notice because I trusted him so blindly. It was a special kind of pain, the kind that makes your ribs feel too tight. Elaine kept going. This isn't amateur-level hiding. He's either been coached, or he's been doing this a long time. A long time, I whispered, heart sinking. You mean before me? Elaine's silence was answer enough. The next morning, Leonard called. We need more, he said. If he has offshore connections, we need direct evidence. Like what? A phone. Emails. Text messages. Anything he didn't expect you to see. Those words sat in my head all afternoon. And that night, while Brett was in the shower, I decided to check the one place I'd never touched before, his nightstand. The bottom drawer. The one he always kept locked. Except today, it wasn't. Inside was a small black box. Unmarked. My pulse quickened. Brett was the kind of man who labeled his folders, who arranged his shirts by color, who kept receipts for months. A plain black box. That was his version of a secret diary. I opened it. A burner phone. My heart jolted like someone had plugged me directly into a wall socket. I turned the phone on and held my breath, praying he hadn't password protected it. He hadn't. The home screen was a nightmare. Messages from Candace. Messages from Lila Kissmark. Messages from Babygirl 23. And dozens more, names I didn't recognize, initials, emojis, anonymous contacts. But the worst part? The group chats. 3 of them. All men. All married. All bragging about weekend hideouts, offshore retreats, bonus lovers, and girls who knew how to keep quiet. My husband was part of an entire underground circle of wealthy, morally bankrupt men using money, fake names, and off-the-grid properties to cheat on their wives as casually as ordering takeout. My hands shook as I scrolled. Photos, women posing on boats, in hotel rooms, in club bathrooms. Receipts, expensive dinners, weekend getaways, private flights. And hidden in the archive folder, something that made my blood run cold. A picture of a pregnancy test. Positive. And under it, a message from Candace. I'm scared. You need to tell her. I can't keep hiding this. And Brett's reply. I said I'll handle Naomi. Stop panicking. We'll figure this out after the next trip. Next trip. My vision blurred. It felt like the world ripped open under my feet and swallowed me whole. A pregnant mistress. Not just an affair, a baby. A new life he was creating while slowly erasing me from our marriage and our finances. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, locked the drawer, and sat on the edge of the bed. When Brett came out of the shower, towel around his waist, he kissed my cheek casually as if nothing in the universe had shifted. Long day, he muttered. I murmured something back, though I couldn't even remember what. I watched him get dressed. I watched him style his hair. I watched him check his watch and send a message from his regular phone. I watched him put on the performance I had once confused for love. And then he said something that made my stomach twist. I'm going to the lake house next weekend. I need to decompress. Next weekend. I forced myself to act normal. Sure. Do you want me to come? His answer came too fast, too sharp. No. I need space. Space. Right. Space to meet Candace. Space to talk about their baby. Space to plan my replacement. I smiled politely. Okay. I'll make plans with Simone then. He nodded, grabbed his keys, and left like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't just detonated my world and walked away from the explosion. The moment the door closed, I grabbed the burner phone and drove straight to Leonard's office. When I slid it across the table, he stared at it like I had just handed him Excalibur. Then he opened it, and as he scrolled through the messages, his expression went from intrigued, to astonished, to outright delighted. This is everything, he whispered. Textbook evidence of marital misconduct, asset hiding, financial deception, and intentional fraud. Naomi, this man is going to lose everything. The next few days were a blur of meetings, documents, signatures, and investigations. Elaine uncovered more than I imagined possible. Brett had been funneling money offshore for nearly 5 years, long before the lake house, long before Candace, long before the first business trip that was actually a rendezvous with one of the women from his group chats. But what hit me hardest wasn't the money. It was realizing that somewhere along the line, Brett had stopped seeing me as his wife and started seeing me as a liability. Something that could take half his fortune if he wasn't careful. Something he needed to outmaneuver, outsmart, and eventually discard. The man I married was gone. Or maybe he had never existed at all. The night before his fishing trip, I sat awake until dawn, watching the sunrise stain the sky pink and gold. And in the stillness of those first morning minutes, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I would let him walk into his own destruction. Friday morning, he left early. Kissed me on the forehead. Told me to relax and enjoy the weekend. Relax. Sure. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, Leonard called me. He left? Yes. Good. The investigator is tailing him. Naomi, we're about to catch him in real time. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought seeing Brett with Candace again would tear me apart. Maybe I thought the sight of them together would shatter whatever remained of my heart. But when the photos began arriving, Brett opening the lake house door for her, Brett stroking her cheek, Brett placing his hand over her belly, I felt nothing except clarity. Cold. Sharp. Crystal clear clarity. He chose this life. He chose these lies. He chose the woman carrying his child. And now he would face everything he had tried to bury. By Sunday, Leonard had enough evidence for 4 separate legal cases. And on Monday morning, we filed. Divorce. Financial misconduct. Fraud. Asset concealment. And temporary freeze orders on every account in his name. That afternoon, Brett walked into the house with an easy smile and kissed my cheek, completely unaware that the life he thought he controlled had already begun to collapse. And the first crack in his world came only 3 hours later. 3 hours after Brett walked through our door, everything he'd worked so hard to hide began unraveling, not with screams or slammed doors, but with a single knock. Sharp, clean, official. The kind of knock that instantly turns the air colder. I was in the kitchen pouring tea when Brett opened the front door. I listened, heart steady. I already knew who it was. Leonard had warned me the moment would be swift and surgical. "Mr. Grant?" a deep voice asked. "Yeah," Brett answered casually. "You've been served." There was a pause. A soft rustle. And then Brett's confused laugh, the kind people make when they think something is a mistake. "What is this?" he asked. Silence. Footsteps fading. The door shutting. Then paper crinkling violently in his hands. The next sound was the one I'd been waiting for, a long, low exhale, tight with panic. He read the documents once. Then again. And again. The kettle behind me hissed like it was reacting to the tension. "What the hell is this?" he finally shouted. I stirred my tea. "What's wrong?" He stormed into the kitchen holding the stack of legal documents like they were burning through his hands. His face had drained of color. His eyes were wide, furious, disbelieving. Divorce? Fraud? Asset concealment? "Naomi, what is this?" I took a slow sip of tea. "It's exactly what it looks like." He slammed the papers onto the counter so hard the drawer beneath rattled. "You blindsided me? With this? Are you out of your mind?" I looked at him calmly, too calmly, and said, "I know everything." He blinked rapidly, nostrils flaring, but didn't speak. "I know about the lake house," I continued. "I know about the women. All of them. I know about the offshore accounts. The shell companies. The burner phone. And I know about Candace." He froze completely, the kind of stillness that only comes from pure terror. "And her pregnancy," I added quietly. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. I could practically hear the gears in his head grinding as he tried to figure out how much I actually knew. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "Naomi, it's not what you think." Isn't that funny? Even men caught with literal proof in their hands always say that line. "Save it," I said. "The papers have been filed. The accounts have been frozen. And the files have been submitted." His mouth opened and closed like he couldn't form words. Then something in him cracked. The mask he'd worn for years slipped just enough to reveal what I now understood had always been there. Coldness. Calculation. Arrogance. "You think you can take me down?" he hissed. "You think you can ruin my life? You don't know who you're playing with." I held his gaze. "Apparently, I do." Something ugly flashed in his eyes. A dark, vindictive glint. Then he grabbed his keys, cursed under his breath, and stormed toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To fix this." He slammed the door so hard a picture on the wall tilted sideways. And with that, he ran straight into the next trap, the one he thought he could outsmart, but couldn't. Later that night, Leonard called me. "He went to Candace," he said. "My investigator got photos. She's hysterical. And get this, Brett told her you were overreacting and trying to destroy him out of spite." I almost laughed. Overreacting? Sure. Because discovering your husband's secret child and hidden millions definitely calls for deep breaths and meditation, not legal firepower. But the funniest part? Candace didn't back him. She didn't scream at me. She didn't blame me. No, she blamed him. Because suddenly the fairy tale version of Brett she believed in shattered too. He had told her I was cold, selfish, and emotionally distant. He had told her I was obsessed with money. He had told her I was the reason he was unhappy. Classic. But what he never told her was the real truth, that she wasn't the only one. That the burner phone wasn't filled with just a few women, but an entire gallery of them. Dozens. So when Brett tried to reassure her that everything would be fine, she threw him out. Literally. Leonard's investigator caught him being shoved from her doorway as she screamed at him to leave her alone. Karma, honestly, has impeccable timing. By morning, the ripple effect had begun. Brett arrived at work to confront his business partners and demand help in neutralizing the fraud accusations. But what he didn't expect was that Leonard had already sent them copies of the financial inconsistencies. Within an hour, they held an emergency meeting. By lunchtime, Brett was escorted out of his own company's headquarters. While all of this unfolded, I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't peace. It was something new and steady, a kind of strength that came from finally standing up for myself instead of smoothing over the damage Brett had spent years inflicting. But the real storm hit 2 days later when Brett showed up at the house pounding on the door like a madman. "Naomi, open this door." His voice cracked somewhere between rage and desperation. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I didn't give him anything. Blind fury, I've learned, looks different when a man starts realizing consequences are real. His breathing was erratic. His voice stumbled. He kept alternating between threats and pleas. "You can't freeze my accounts. I have people depending on me. You're ruining my life. We can fix this, just take it all back. You're making a mistake. Open the door. Naomi, please, please." Hearing him beg didn't feel like victory. It felt like justice. The universe rebalancing after years of imbalance. Eventually the banging stopped. I peeked through the curtain. He was sitting on the porch steps with his head in his hands. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Fragile. Cracked open by the mess he made. Part of me once would have pitied him. That part of me was dead. He left without another word. The next morning, Leonard called again. He's hired a lawyer. A very aggressive one. But don't worry, their aggression is just a show. They know they don't have much to fight with. We prepared for the first hearing, a temporary support and asset freeze review. Brett contested everything, of course. He claimed the burner phone wasn't his. He said the photos from the lake house were misinterpreted. He denied the affair with Candace. He denied the pregnancy. He denied the offshore accounts. He even claimed the financial inconsistencies were clerical errors. Men like Brett don't take responsibility. They rewrite reality. They lie so deeply they drown in their own stories. But what he didn't know was that we had more. Elaine had traced nearly half a dozen offshore transfers directly back to Brett's laptop logins. The investigator had captured videos of him meeting Candace at the lake house multiple times. And Candace, after finding out about the burner phone full of women, had contacted Leonard's office with a message I never expected. "I want to talk." She met with Leonard privately, then with me. Candace looked exhausted, eyes swollen, hands trembling, voice cracking under the weight of everything she thought she had. She told me Brett promised her the world. That he said he wanted a future with her. That he told her I was cold and cruel and impossible to love. She cried as she apologized to me. Cried harder when she explained she didn't know about the others. And when she shifted her purse and I caught the glimpse of her growing belly under her sweater, I felt a complicated mix of emotions, not anger anymore. Something softer. Something sadder. She was a victim too. Not innocent, but misled. Manipulated. Lied to. She agreed to testify. She handed over messages. Screenshots. Voice notes. Everything. And on the day of the first hearing, Brett walked into the courtroom looking like a ghost, pale, tense, jumpy. His lawyer whispered in his ear and handed him documents. He skimmed them, and his face drained even further. He had just learned Candace was testifying against him. I sat tall. Calm. Silent. Brett refused to look at me. The judge reviewed the evidence with measured disappointment. And when she finally spoke, her words hit Brett like a punch. Given the severity of the misconduct, the intentional concealment of assets, and the documented extramarital behavior, all temporary requests from the petitioner are granted. Everything. Granted. Account freezes. Financial control. Temporary support. Restraining order regarding financial access. Brett clenched his jaw so hard a vein bulged in his temple. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, but Brett shrugged it off violently. The hearing ended. Brett stormed out. I watched him go, shoulders tight, steps frantic, breathing uneven. It was the walk of a man whose entire world had cracked, and he didn't know how to glue any piece back together. But the collapse wasn't over. What happened next, in the weeks following, would take everything from him. And give everything back to me. Brett's unraveling didn't happen all at once. It happened in slow, humiliating waves, the kind that crash harder every time you think they can't get any worse. In the days after the hearing, I barely saw him, but I didn't need to. Leonard kept me updated with a quiet satisfaction that felt almost therapeutic. He's scrambling, he said one morning. And men like him don't scramble unless they're drowning. And drowning was exactly what Brett was doing. His business partners had forced him onto temporary leave while they conducted a third-party financial audit. Which was a polite way of saying, we think you're a liability and possibly a criminal. Rumors shot through his company like wildfire. Some employees whispered about fraud. Others about affairs. And by the end of the week, Leonard forwarded me a screenshot of a private LinkedIn post from one of Brett's biggest investors. We stand firmly against misconduct of any kind. We are cooperating fully with auditors to ensure transparency. Translation: we're done protecting you. I wish I could say I felt joy, but the truth is, I felt nothing. Not anymore. I had cried all my tears weeks ago. What was left of me wasn't bitter, just clean. Empty of illusion. Clear-headed in a way I'd never been before. That emotional clarity helped me grow something new in the vacuum Brett left behind, a spine made of iron. Meanwhile, he spiraled. He called me dozens of times a day at first, begging, bargaining, promising he could make everything right. I didn't answer. Then he went from apologetic to angry, leaving long, rambling voicemails about how I'd overreacted and misinterpreted everything. When that didn't work, he tried guilt. When guilt failed, he tried threats. And when threats led nowhere, he did what desperate men do. He made mistakes. It started when he tried to access one of our frozen accounts using a VPN and an old laptop he kept at the office. What Brett didn't know was that Leonard had already informed the bank of his patterns. When Brett attempted the login, alarms went off, not literal ones, but legal ones. The bank flagged it. Notified Leonard. Then Leonard notified the State Financial Crimes Division, because Brett had just attempted what looked suspiciously like intentional financial evasion. That same night, a black sedan rolled slowly down our street, headlights off, stopping in front of our house. Not threateningly, officially. Two men stepped out wearing plain suits and calm expressions, holding gold badges that glinted under the streetlight. Financial Crimes Bureau. Brett wasn't home. For once, he was lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. They didn't need him present. They just needed access to the accounts and transactions Leonard sent them. Within 24 hours, they opened a preliminary investigation into Brett's finances. I didn't know how far it would go. I didn't care. Justice has a funny way of picking up momentum once the truth starts rolling. While Brett's world shrank, mine slowly expanded. Simone practically moved into my house, dragging sunlight with her every time she walked in, carrying iced coffee and those stupid chocolate croissants she loved. You need to eat, she kept reminding me. You need to sleep. But she also said something else, something that stuck with me. Remember who you were before him. At first I didn't know how. It felt like trying to remember the sound of my own laugh before a long illness. But I tried anyway. I returned to my design studio. The place where I had once lost hours sketching patterns and planning concepts that made my heart vibrate in my chest. When I opened the door after too long away, the scent of newly delivered fabric rolls and cedarwood cleaner wrapped around me like a hug. The soft hum of sewing machines from the back room made my chest tighten in a different way, a good way. My team greeted me with cautious smiles at first, then relieved ones when they realized I wasn't going to crumble. They didn't know the details, I wasn't ready to share, but they knew enough to tiptoe. I didn't want them to. Treat me normally, I told them. Please. And they did. Designing again felt like remembering how to breathe. For a few hours each day, the mess Brett created drifted to the background. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped waiting for updates. I stopped giving him power. But the universe wasn't done writing the story yet. The next turning point came 2 weeks after the hearing. I was in the studio reviewing fabric samples when my phone vibrated with a message from Leonard. Call me. It's urgent. My stomach tightened. I stepped outside and dialed. Leonard answered immediately. He was arrested. Just like that. 3 words that landed in my chest like a quiet bomb. What? I whispered, gripping the railing. For attempted financial evasion while under court freeze, and for suspected asset concealment. They're processing him now. I closed my eyes. The sun warmed my face, but my blood felt cold. I didn't know how to feel. I expected relief. Triumph. Something dramatic. But instead, I felt tired. Tired in my bones. What happens now? I finally asked. There will be a hearing. Possibly more, depending on what the auditors uncover. This doesn't mean prison yet, but it's serious, Naomi. Really serious. He's in deep, deep, into lies, into consequences, into the grave he dug with his own hands. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, staring at the empty side of the bed. Not missing him, just acknowledging the strange quiet he left behind. It's eerie when someone's chaos stops abruptly. It leaves a silence almost too loud to bear. But the silence didn't last long. 3 days later, Candace requested another meeting. This time she asked for me, not Leonard. It was at a quiet cafe outside the city, away from the chaos swirling around the three of us. I arrived early, ordered a tea, and waited with a mix of dread and curiosity. She walked in slowly, hand resting protectively on her belly. When she sat across from me, her eyes were softer than before, tired, but calmer. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For exposing him. For doing what I should have done when I first saw the signs." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to being thanked for something that had wrecked my life. Candace took a deep breath. "He called me from the detention center. Begged me to help him. Begged me to testify on his behalf. Said the baby needs stability." She rolled her eyes so hard I almost smiled. "Naomi, he doesn't want stability. He wants control. And he wants someone to pull him from the hole he crawled into." I nodded slowly. "That sounds about right." "He also told me he still loves me," she added, voice tightening with disgust. "Said you were being dramatic. Said you were vindictive. Said I should stand by him so we can still have our future." "Did you believe him?" I asked gently. Her eyes misted. "No. Not anymore. Not after everything. Not after seeing the burner phone messages. I wasn't just betrayed, I was stupid." I shook my head. "You weren't stupid. You were lied to." She wiped a tear and forced a smile. "I'm keeping the baby. But I'm not keeping him." Somewhere inside me, something loosened, a small knot of tension I didn't realize I'd been carrying. We talked for almost an hour. Not as enemies. Not as rivals. But as two women cleaning up after the same hurricane. I was surprised by how healing it felt, not because I forgave Brett, but because I finally understood that his actions had destroyed more than just my world. He had broken hers too. By the time I left the cafe, a strange calm washed over me. A feeling that the worst had already passed. And I was right. The final collapse came during the pre-trial hearing for Brett's financial misconduct case. The courtroom was colder than the last time, both literally and emotionally. Brett walked in wearing a stiff suit that hung on him awkwardly, as if he'd lost weight. His eyes looked sunken, his hair unkempt. He didn't look like the charismatic, polished man I once married. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Someone who had been living inside a nightmare of his own making. His lawyer tried to argue that Brett's financial inconsistencies were miscalculations, not criminal intent. But the state brought forward new evidence, logs, timestamps, emails he thought he'd deleted. All linking him directly to offshore accounts worth more than anyone had imagined. $48 million. Nearly $50 million he tried to tuck away while still pretending to kiss me goodnight. When the judge asked him to address the court, Brett stood shakily and said, "I did what I had to do to protect myself." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. It was just hollow. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. Not because he'd hurt me, but because he realized I was no longer his to manipulate. He'd lost control. Forever. The judge ordered a full trial. Brett collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed him. They didn't swarm me. They didn't know my name. My identity remained protected. I stayed faceless, invisible, quietly rebuilding my life while his fell apart publicly. A few weeks later, I finalized the divorce. Brett lost the lake house, his company position, and access to the accounts he once used to fund his double life. He moved into a temporary rental. His reputation shattered. And slowly, beautifully, I rebuilt myself. My design studio took off again, faster than before. Clients admired my resilience, even without knowing the story behind it. My work grew bolder, more expressive, filled with colors and patterns that reflected the fire inside me. My team felt it too. They said I seemed lighter, stronger, like a woman who took her soul back. They were right. Simone convinced me to take a trip, just us, to the California coastline. We drove along cliffs overlooking the ocean, ate seafood on breezy patios, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and I felt something I feared I'd lost forever. Joy. On the last night, standing barefoot in the sand with the waves brushing my ankles, I breathed in the salty air and whispered, "I'm free." Months later, Brett's trial concluded. He didn't get prison time, not yet, but he received heavy financial restitution, regulatory penalties, and potential future oversight. His career was effectively over. His reputation? Dust. I didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't need to. Justice had already been served piece by piece. I received a simple letter from the court. A closure notice. And then, nothing. Silence. A new life waiting. I sold the brownstone. Moved into a bright downtown loft with tall windows and warm brick walls that felt like a hug. My studio expanded. My friendships deepened. I decorated my space exactly how I wanted without worrying about Brett's opinions. And one morning, months after everything ended, I woke up in sunlight and realized I could breathe again, fully, deeply, freely. The woman I once was, the one who trusted blindly, who shrank to make him comfortable, who apologized for existing, was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone whole. Someone powerful. Someone who survived the kind of heartbreak that destroys people. And built an empire on top of the ashes. That is how I took him down. And how I finally rose. Thank you for listening to this powerful story on the spoken pen. If it moved you, shocked you, or kept you hooked all the way through, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves a good story, and subscribe for more weekly narrations. Tell us your thoughts below, and where you're watching from. Until next time, keep your pen sharp, your heart open, and your truth louder than lies.